What's a sign of childhood trauma? In some cases, excessive people-pleasing tendencies. Hyper-independence. Can't be let down if you never ask for anything in the first place. Difficulties trusting. Low self-esteem. Fears of being judged. I am always scared that people are mad at me. Always. Unable to forgive themselves for small mistakes. Trouble forming relationships. Completely shutting down when criticized or corrected. Took me years to get past this. Edit. Okay. Was not expecting this level of response. Hell, I didn't even know this was a diagnosis with a name. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria. In an attempt to answer questions, I'll explain as succinctly as possible. TL. Doctor at the bottom. Backstory. My parents are boomers. Dad grew up in a coal mining town in southern Illinois. Was a Vietnam Marine turned missionary in Uganda in the late 70s. Interesting times, is his description. Mom grew up in Savannah, Georgia and survived the civil rights and integration riots of the Deep South. Became a missionary to South America also in the late 70s. Viva la Revolution. So, suffice it to say they've lived through some shit and are orders of magnitude harder fucks than I'll ever be. They didn't have the tools we do today to diagnose and cope. So they internalized all of it instead. On top of a ton of old-fashioned generational blue-collar trauma. As is tradition, it was passed on to me. How I recognized and started treating it. Boot camp got the ball rolling. It keeps you at a functional high level of stress. To the point you just have to deal with it. There's no time to shut down or feel sorry for yourself. You showed up behind schedule and don't realize you've caught up until you get to your first unit and oversleep for the first time on your day off. I lucked up and my, then, girlfriend spotted it. She stopped letting me retreat to my dark place. I eventually married her. Even then it was years before we realized how broken I was. I found mentors in different areas of interest. Some were authors or had podcasts. The main one was a gunsmith and had a PhD of history who took me in when my parents split. He gave solid advice which I took to heart. PT. The hardest part is working out and building discipline. Sometimes I have to be at muscle failure before I can think straight. Research. I've been reading up on stress, trauma, PTSD, recovery, historical warrior cultures, meditation, all of it. Been attacking this like an engineer or mechanic instead of a doctor. Lastly, most importantly, I got help from other people. I could not do this alone. It was just too much to process. TLDR. Bootcamp. No time for self-recrimination. Too much shit to do. Found a friend willing and able to help. Found mentors. In person and in books, podcasts. Physical training. It sucks but works. Researched the topic across multiple disciplines and cultures. Strangely, I never found the RSD diagnosis. I got help. I found people to help me. Oversharing when you haven't known the person long, or the opposite where you don't open up to anybody. Two extremes. Hypervigilance. Getting disproportionately frustrated at themselves for small accidents such as spilling things, accidentally breaking something, etc. What happens is, a lot of these people would be abused as a kid for these things. So as an adult when it happens, their brain overloads their system with fear and anxiety. And frustration can be secondary emotion to that. So when these things happens, this is basically a conditioned response because your brain associates these accidents with imminent danger. This is why therapy is so important for people who had shit childhoods, especially during their developing years. I had no idea this was a thing until I went to therapy. But when my therapist explained this to me, it made so much sense. And now when these things happen, I tend to laugh it off. Scared of conflict to the point you avoid it at all costs. Certain that if it happens the other person will hate you, it will end awfully. You've never seen people calmly sit down and discuss their emotions in a loving way. So that world doesn't exist. Having a hard time showing emotion. Edit. Wow. Many people are replying to this. Sorry in advance if I don't get around to reply to you specifically. Some of you have also mentioned the other extreme of this. A lot of emotion, outbursts of emotion. Regardless, I hope everybody is doing better. Less than 3. Edit 2. Thanks for the awards, smiley face. Inability to form and keep relationships. Having sparse or little to no memory of your childhood. Eating disorders. Depression. Social anxiety. Agoraphobia. Extreme emotional shifts. Attachment issues. Consistent exhaustion. Strong unexplainable reactions toward social stimuli. Separation anxiety. Gastrointestinal issues and complications. Substance abuse and addiction. Intrusive thoughts. Self-destructive behavior. Etc. Constantly apologizing for every little thing. Extreme introversion. Little to no outward emotion. Ability to stay calm in emergencies or chaotic situations. Choosing partners who don't support, cherish or value you. Choosing jobs and relationships that reflect the lack of empathy and neglect that you grew up with. Feeling bad just for existing. Edit. Tism for the award, and I'm sorry to everyone that relates to this comment. I promise you have nothing to be sorry for. Hard hands, light skin tone. Finding someone perfect for you and then systematically sabotaging it. Extreme self-cringe. Doubting if what you said was the right thing. Doubting if you acted the right way. Or behaved the right way in a social setting. Asking someone several times if you did something correctly. Zoning out because you randomly remembered a traumatic childhood memory. Low self-esteem. Lack of confidence. Perfectionism. Addictions. Compromised relationship to intimacy. Their bodies. Eating. Money. Difficulty making relationships. Fears of being judged and low self-esteem. Peacekeeping. A kid doesn't realize their parent, mom in my case, is an emotionally abusive asshole. All I knew is I didn't want people to be so mad at each other. I think my life would have been better if I hadn't talked them out of divorce. Childish activities become almost like treats. Edit, since this is getting big. People can just enjoy watching things from their childhood or playing games or whatever independently from trauma. But it is incredibly common for the people with trauma to basically want to relive their childhood that they lost when they are in a safer environment. Always saying sorry. Feeling guilty for speaking up. An adult acting childlike. People think it's cringe, but age regression is a trauma response. You can especially see this as you've ever been to a psych ward. People are clinging to blankets and stuffed animals. Childhood was probably the last time they existed without being traumatized. No or few good memories. Being an empath. You actually have conditioned yourself to be highly attuned to micro changes that indicate negativity you need to look out for. Also codependency or hyper-independence. Constant dark humor or self-deprecating humor. Also the ability to totally pretend crappy things never happened or pretend someone didn't do something awful to you. People might think you're really funny and forgiving, but sometimes they are both just coping mechanisms. Being insecurely attached to friends and romantic partners. Being afraid to ask for things. Remembering footsteps. Not liking spending time with family. Doesn't like going out because you'd be alone and watching others have fun with each other. Your own family not remembering the last time you laughed or telling you to smile. And constantly saying, I wish she'd smile more, while looking at photos. Being shy or awkward around your own friends in person. Over-explaining. Always having an escape plan. From the current room, building, or most importantly, current life situation. They make no eye contact. I know because even at the age of 45 I will always struggle with thism. Delayed emotional maturation. Underlying. Unresolved anger issues. Low self-worth. Abandonment issues. Overly sexualized behaviors. What I see most in people I know. It's the excessive apologizing. They'll be talking a lot about something they're interested in and constantly apologize for talking so much. Like, nah. Go off. I like hearing about what you're into. Avoiding conflict and suppressing your opinions. Hyper-independence. Withdrawing from intimacy and relationships. Contempt for and avoidance of your partner when they make bids for closeness. Vulnerability and connection. Not being able to remember portions of your childhood or it being blurry. These types of posts make me feel shitty. Poor social skills. Complex PTSD. ADHD-like symptoms. Inability to feel or process some emotions. For example, can't feel lonely. Isolation. As a child, was my only time of peace. And now I crave it to an unhealthy degree. Being alone never gets old for me. I never feel the need to be near or with anyone ever. I've never dated IRL. I've never had more than one strong friendship. Inability to trust that people are genuine. I can't receive a compliment. I believe 100% of them are just lying to me or lining me up to use me for some reason. I can be criticized. But it's meaningless. It doesn't hurt. Or change anything. Everything in my entire life has had major negative critical judgment. And it's like water off a duck's back now. Lack of desire to compete or accomplish. This can include goal setting. As a child I learned. No matter how much effort I put in to get something I wanted, it wasn't good enough. Or it would be taken away by the poor decisions of parents. They would move, destroy it, lose it, give it away to someone else. Or move me away from it. So, even at 40, there's nothing I'll work towards. Because nothing feels like it's real. Or worth it. Or going to be kept. I'm like the anti-hoarder. Nothing has value to me like it should. Nothing. Loss of sense of self. Sometimes you feel disembodied. You feel like an observer in your own life. Third-personing things. Lots of self-deprecation and constantly feeling like a burden. Hyperactivity, you can never do enough. Cynicism. No self-esteem. Horrible self-talk. No trust in others or yourself. Living in a fog. No memory of childhood. Anger issues. No tolerance for anything less than perfect. Especially from self. Feels like a failure. Can't feel happy. Ruminating and obsessing over the smallest mistake. Always apologizing. Emotional dysregulation. Lack of executive functioning skills. Break down as someone corrects or criticizes. Can't express emotions. Hold on. Let me just go through the list that I have. Low self-esteem. Attachment issues. Need to prove yourself. Blaming yourself for everything. Needing physical contact. Rejecting physical contact. Fear of arguing. Anger issues. Abandonment issues. Holding everything in to not upset anyone. Always apologizing. Issues with trust. Anxiety. Rejection sensitivity. Oversharing and feeling guilty afterwards. Overanalyzing everything you say. In my experience, it's reliving it in your head when you get drunk. Lol. Saddest bingo of my life. Animals are better than people. Constantly feeling like you need approval from other people. Someone once told me, your parents shouldn't be your first bullies, and holy fuck, that rocked me. One sign you can notice in yourself that I didn't realize until I started therapy. You don't have physical sensations when feeling. Everything is just like mental? It's hard to explain, but happiness is supposed to exist somewhere physically. Not every emotion is supposed to be represented by your permanent vague chest tension. Wild. Another sign. You rarely, if ever, talk about yourself socially. I ask a shit ton of questions of people, and I am happy to listen to them and hear their problems. But I don't share much of myself to anyone. It makes it hard for me to deepen relationships because I don't practice vulnerability. I don't think people want to hear from me. Finally. Hypervigilance. I know people based on their footsteps. I know where my husband is at any given moment. He's lovely. He just has to deal with my traumatized ass in the house. I don't think I have ever truly relaxed. But TBH. This thread is kind of nice for me. In a weird way. It's terrible other people experience this. But I don't feel so alone right now. Not trauma per se. But as a father, I got criticized a lot by my wife, saying I'm spoiling my son. Simply because I got very little attention from my father when I was a kid. I feel I'm trying to heal this by being my own ideal father. Difficulty trusting, animosity towards authority. One of my friends in high school was always so rude to teachers, counselors, security guards, people's parents, etc. Anyone who was in a position of authority. I couldn't understand why, because it seemed to me that they just wanted to make sure we didn't ruin our lives doing dumb teenage stuff. It made so much sense when she confided in me that she had been molested by authority figures, her father, uncles, teachers, tutors, as a young child. Not asking for things because they'll say no. Till I have childhood trauma. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, Subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.